the lecture. And I just was, there is the handouts, of course, for this class, like a majority of them, this is the class with the most handouts. A majority of them are rebate information. And then one of them is how to construct like a rain garden or a rain basin. And we'll have a slide later, but just so you know, those handouts are for this class. Oops, I guess. Yeah, so this is basically the second part of irrigation. We are going to talk a little, a kind of wrap up of last times, you know, like how you change the irrigation as the garden matures, which should be kind of review. We'll talk a little bit about smart controllers. And this third point we actually did already with the homework. We'll mostly talk about kind of California statewide regulations and things like that. And then we'll talk about the rebates. So in a nutshell, we're changing the irrigation as the garden matures. Remember that this should all be recap, guys, but essentially in the first couple, 2 to 3 years, we are establishing the garden. And then once it's established, it can take longer stretches of time without as frequent of waterings. So usually with the first year, we're talking about, essentially the goal is to train the roots to move into the surrounding soil, right? So this establishing period is to train the roots to move into the surrounding soil and deeper down so that they have access to soil moisture. And then thus in time will be able to withstand longer periods of time without water. So they can kind of withstand these drought periods or summer maybe just. So that is kind of the goal, is then we water kind of more frequently because the root systems are bound by the container. So they're smaller to start with, and that should make sense. And we are kind of watering them more frequently, the most frequently in the first year. This is the most frequent waterings you'll do probably for the life of the plant. But then we slowly are tapering off. It's basically slowly tapering off until they're established. But that first winter, they're definitely going to need moisture. And if there is not a good rainy season, much like the one that is predicted for this winter, you need to supplement that water. So you need to be watering appropriately. And especially in that first year, because their roots are still small and not this extensive web like we want when they're developed or established, you need to be pretty vigilant about monitoring those plants, those young plants. So any heat wave, any wind advisory thing, or even just like a La Nina year or not adequate amount of rain, you need to get ahead of or water appropriately when it's needed. And then there's this last note that, again, you really want that deep watering, which is, we kind of kept harping on this 1.5 inches, but it can be 1.5 to 2 inches depending on your soil type and all the other factors we talked about in the last class. But generally speaking, you want about 3 to 5 gallons per gallon of pot, or gallon plant. So those 1 gallon pot plants, usually when you're watering them, usually to get that deep watering, you're going to put down about 3 to 5 gallons. And I don't know if anyone remembers that slide, but that's because 1 gallon of water is about 1.5 inches on 1 square foot. But you're not watering just 1 square foot, you're watering all around the plant because, again, we want to make sure we're encouraging the roots to move outward, not just stay where they are. So you're actually watering about 3 to 5 square feet around. So that's why you would be watering at least 3 to 5 gallons per watering event, like deep watering event. Of course, you might have to have waterings in between those deep watering events, but that's kind of the idea there. And then we say use 10 gallons per plant when you install, because when at installation, you definitely want to do a really deep watering, a nice kind of good saturating of the soil to make that kind of soil water contact on initial installation. So just always remember you're doing a really good watering. It feels like almost flooding or overwatering at the first installation. So like right when the plants go in the ground, in addition to watering the hole that you're planting it in and letting it drain. So that's just kind of a reminder. The second year, so if everything's going well, you're still watering, deep infrequent waters is what your goal is. So you are going to start reducing the irrigation frequency, especially by that second summer. So the second year, we want to reduce the frequency. Of course, if there's like no rain, you might have to adjust the watering frequency, and maybe it waits another year or something. But essentially, you want to start moving in the direction of reducing the frequency of waterings by that second summer. And of course, you want to get that top 18 inches wet, and that usually corresponds to about 1.5 to 2 inches in terms of like precipitation or irrigation talk, right? But you want to make sure that 1.5 feet down is moist when you water after a watering event. Even if it takes you 3 days to water it, you want to know that the soil is good and wet deep down. And this goes for any year, but make sure that you're applying the water so it's actually infiltrating and not just running off. You don't want to just set your timer or automated system and walk away. You want to make sure that actually it's infiltrating. And that really does go for any year. By year 2, I think it's good to have kind of like an indicator plant for a garden, because all your gardens are kind of different. And having some plant that's kind of like the canary in the coal mine that says like, hey, it's dry here. And usually that's going to be some kind of like fleshy, tender perennial. So something like Erigeron glauca, even Sphaerolaceae ambigua, which is apricot mallow, they start flagging or like kind of wilting sooner than other plants. But it depends, it depends on who's in your garden. But if you can have an indicator plant like that, that can be really helpful for kind of honing your more tactile skills and not just depending on whatever automated system you might have in place. So that's always a good thing to kind of start to have by each early on in the garden, so that you kind of can just read the garden when you see it and be like, oh God, that guy's he's wilting. I better water the whole thing, that sort of thing. Let's see. Of course, this was mentioned in the last lecture, but yes, anytime you have lower than the average rainfall, which is our winter time, anytime we have lower than the average rainfall, you want to supplement that water and make sure that the plants are actually getting what they are supposed to get, or I guess supposed to get isn't the right word, but what they are evolved to receive. So you want to kind of aim for that average. And I know droughts are kind of like becoming the new normal, but the plants are actually adapted to not have these like, decades-long droughts in between them. Okay, year 3, this is now you're really starting to taper off. You should be following this strategy still of the infrequent deep waterings, but you really should be now able to reduce the frequency to the minimum, the least frequent amount of waterings. Again, each watering is the same amount, but you want less frequent, so you don't need to do them as often. And this is like the 3rd year is, what we kind of consider the established year or establishing year. So at this point, you really want it to be kind of like more the standard, the pattern of the established gardens watering schedule. And you can do these little quick spritz or refreshing sprinkle waterings, but again, they don't count towards your overall like deep watering. Quick spritzes are going to be like, a couple minutes or like 5 minutes on the sprinklers or something, where it's just kind of cleaning the leaves and cooling down the site and kind of just cleaning it up a bit. Those you could do them earlier you can do them in year 1 and 2, honestly, but it's just something you can start to get in the habit of as they are establishing. And then by year 4, we would consider this an established garden. And these plants will be, irrigation wise, you're kind of in your pattern, right? It's basically, you just change your irrigation maybe seasonally, but they're in their rhythm and you don't need to be doing frequent waterings. Of course, irrigation systems fall apart and need, repair, or mineral buildup on, that needs to be, like filters need to be cleaned. All of those things happen with irrigation systems. So irrigation wise, it's a lot of monitoring post year 4. So year 4 and beyond, you're just checking your irrigation system and making sure that it's watering appropriately for the age of the garden. So you don't want to be still set on these really frequent waterings when the garden is, 6 or 7 years old. And that goes for if you're adding new plants. So of course, adding new plants is a normal part of gardening. And if you're adding new plants, you want to make sure adding new plants to an already established garden, those plants will need to start over again with that irrigation schedule, and they'll need those frequent waterings. So it's probably best to kind of hand water them, or but definitely don't set your established plants on that more frequent watering schedule. Then you risk overwatering the established ones. So you might just have to hand water those other guys, the new guys, until they're established and they can handle that watering schedule that the rest of the garden is on. I wanted to, also year 4, actually, yeah, any of the later years, you might also have to add emitters, as the plants, if you have a drip system and you have a large bush, you might have to add more emitters or move them out wider as the plant matures so that you're adequately watering all the soil around that now larger plant. And what else was there? Just anything, like if maybe now your plant's bigger and it's actually blocking the sprinkler and the pop-up or something like that, you'll just have to prune accordingly, but just basically make sure that the garden is still being irrigated the way you had intended. And of course, at this point, they should be able to withstand a summer, like a mature established garden should be able to withstand a summer without watering. But many of them, as we talked, will look a little bit better, without a summer watering. I don't think I said that. So many of the established gardens will do well without, they can survive a summer without watering, but they might look a little less crispy if you do water them in the summer. And of course it depends on the plant, but just that's kind of the nutshell of the last class. So now we'll abruptly move to smart controllers and kind of the benefits of technology. So essentially, we'll start with this little statistic that essentially outdoor water use in the US accounts for more than 9 billion gallons of water every day. And that's mostly all used for irrigation of landscapes. So they estimate that about 50% of that 9 billion gallons, so like 4.5 billion gallons a day, is wasted due to overwatering from lots of different things, but usually the irrigation method or the system that you're using. So that's a lot of wasted water, and especially important to conserve in obviously our SoCal environment. So a lot of the best practices that we've talked about already, and also clearly like smart controllers and technology can reduce that issue by applying water only when the plant needs it, because we don't want to be watering extra. That's why we want the least frequent waterings with native plants. That can help save water, but also actually taking advantage of these like smart controllers and stuff. So also I think smart controllers is an interesting term, because we have the kind of old outdated smart controllers, the old smart, which is like the automated ones and maybe ones that you're familiar with using. And those ones were designed to err on the side of overwatering. And that's because most of the landscape was dominated, and still is really dominated, by lawns. So lawns like frequent waterings, frequent shallow waterings, which is not what native plants want. And so a lot of our kind of older automated sprinkler systems really err on this side of watering very frequently and basically overwatering, because the lawn can handle that. But with a native plant garden, that won't help, and actually will potentially kill your whole garden. So you don't want it to be erring on the side of overwatering. And a lot of the smart controllers actually take in real-time weather data and match will adjust the timing of your watering cycle to delay it after rain or something like that. So obviously they can save water. We're going to talk about some of the benefits, but obviously they can save water by just watering, or not watering when it's raining, when it's actively raining, but also adjusting so that you're watering when some period of time after the rainfall. And also just all the things I just mentioned. I think it should be clear how you can save water in that way. You can also set it up to seasonally adjust it so that it's appropriate for the different seasons, and also it's taking into account whatever local watering restrictions you have. You can keep it outside, like program it to avoid those time periods that aren't allowed. And then clearly any kind of remote access, having access to a smart controller and being able to program it from a phone is like the reason why everything's on our phone now. Having that is way more convenient, clearly. And yeah, there's also just increased interest in them, because I think a lot of people have, smart devices, sorry, smart home devices. So other things in their home are, you know, on their phone and they're accessing them from there. So obviously there might be more interest in also irrigation systems being that way. But yeah, anyway, essentially, like, they are kind of becoming they're the future, whether or not like a Luddite like me cares or wants that or not. Because I have to say, I'm probably the least qualified salesperson for smart controllers, because personally I'm like, you know, kind of a hand water type or drip systems, but not that drip systems can't be attached to these. But either way, that being said, they are the future. You know what I mean? I do understand their benefits. And more kind of things like wireless flow meters are coming. All those things are coming, and probably we'll all have to have these kind of systems anyway. Some of the drawbacks, though, would be essentially, yeah, Luddites like me, you could have a homeowner or maybe your own crew or yourself might not be adept at using smartphone apps. And this might just be too much for the homeowner potentially to run on their own. And they might just, and then you would be responsible for communicating with them what's going on. And if, say, there's some scheduling thing, like they want to have a wedding in their backyard and they don't want the sprinklers to go off, then they need to contact you. And then it puts you as being this middle person, which could be a drawback. Also, they can be kind of complex in terms of the programming and like needing a lot of upfront programming, kind of the same as the first point. But potentially, yeah, they might not make sense for a very small like situation. In fact, there might just be limitations in how you can use them in terms of, I think, a very small situation like homeowners. Maybe it doesn't make sense if you just have a really small, simple yard to have such a nuanced kind of like different hydro zones and all that sort of thing for, smart controller for that kind of situation. And then of course they need, you know, a lot of them need internet or Wi-Fi or whatever. So if you don't have that situation set up, then yeah, they won't be very helpful for you. So irrigation problems, really there's just two. So problems that come up from irrigation would just be essentially overwatering or underwatering. That's so much simpler just said than actually dealing with these things. But a lot of these, I think both of these problems, you typically, I think if you're not already familiar with how to avoid them, you kind of have to learn by failure. I think, at least in my own experience, that's how I've had to learn. But overwatering, I think, is a little bit more common with like newbies to natives that are really eager and maybe used to watering ornamental plants or maybe a vegetable garden. That's when they kind of water too much because these are native plants. They like that dry down. So I see it more common with like really eager newbies to natives when we see some overwatering. But anyone can fall to this one. And I guess, yeah, mostly there's a lot of different things. Basically, both of the symptoms you might see for overwatering or underwatering, they look very similar, except for overwatering, you'll see the presence of moisture on the soil, and underwatering, you wouldn't. But a lot of the same things, like you might see wilting with overwatering. You might see dieback of the branches or the tips of the plants. You might see like them dropping a lot of leaves. But of course, I think the biggest clue will be touching the soil. If you're seeing a lot of like fungal growth at the soil, maybe at the mulch kind of soil level, and you're seeing some problems in your plants, that's where I would be suspicious. Especially if you're seeing that wilting. You're seeing wilting at the tips of the plants, and you're seeing soil moisture, and it's not recovering, by the next evening or something. It's not one of the stress responses. That's when I would really suspect overwatering, but it's always kind of the presence of soil moisture. And then just in general, when you're overwatering, you're basically just creating the conditions where you're kind of slowly rotting the plant. You're not like really drowning it, you're just slowly rotting it, or creating conditions where root rot or crown rot thrive and then basically kill the plant. So evidence of an overwatering would be if you've ever seen a plant and it dies suddenly, and then you can actually just pull it out, like you grab the stem or trunk of the plant and it just comes directly out of the ground, and there's very little roots attached and clearly a lot of moisture. That's usually a sign of crown rot. So if you've ever had that experience, that might be an overwatering situation. And then of course, anytime you have any kind of swampy, obvious conditions and they smell anaerobic, that's a bad sign. In terms of underwatering, a main thing to notice is, well, wait, I guess, yeah, I'll start with the slide itself, which is knowing the difference between the drought versus summer. So our summers are not considered drought. We have very little to no rainfall in the summer, and that is a normal pattern that our plants are adapted to. This is the Mediterranean climate. They are totally comfortable with it. They're not suffering in summer, even if they look crispy. That's just an adaptation that they've evolved to deal with the heat, but they're not like struggling to survive. That is just their adaptation. Whereas drought is a prolonged period of a lack of natural rainfall, and our rainfall comes in the winter time. So if we're not receiving that winter rainfall, that's when, and multiple years in a row, that's not a normal pattern, even though it's becoming a new normal pattern. But other lecture, that's drought, and that's stressful. So that is stressing the plants. That's why we need to be watering in the winter if they're not receiving the kind of expected average, or at least supplementing a bit of it. So yeah, just to know that difference, that they're not suffering from summer, but drought is not something, they are stressed from drought. They are potentially, a lot of our native plants are drought tolerant, but they're not drought proof. So they can't just experience drought forever. Oh wait, I think I had something else I was going to say about, yes. I think, yes, I had some notes. Oh, it was just, again, the symptoms. So some of the signs you might notice, which would be a lot of the signs you might see with the overwatering, but anything on the leaves, you might see that the leaves are kind of losing their kind of healthy shine and luster. They might be changing in size even. You might see the new growth is getting smaller, or of course, wilting. That, again, the wilting would be a sign, especially if it's not returning to its rigidity the next day or that evening. And again, tip or branch dieback, that can be a sign of underwatering. Really, with underwatering, the younger plants are going to be more susceptible, of course, because their roots are bound by that, they're smaller root systems. So the younger the plant, the more susceptible it is to underwatering. And the older plants are much less susceptible, especially if they're already established, because they have those extensive root systems. So I will start, this lecture is kind of funny and all over the place. It feels like it's very, I think it's just like the grab bag of all the other irrigation things. But I should mention, I'm going to go a bit over the hour. Normally we do a break at the hour, but I'm going to go over it because I want to make time for Martha at the end. So we'll take a break in between her and I. So now talking about basically the state of California and its kind of water use regulations. Okay, so I kind of wished I had organized these a little bit differently, but I'll try to work with how they are. So as you guys probably know, California has a bunch of regulations around basically trying to promote or reduce water use throughout the state, and promote efficient water use. And they have a lot of different resources. So it's not just regulations, they also have a bunch of resources for us to help us in that aim. So some of them would be something like WUCLs, which I'm going to have a couple slides for each of these. WUCLs is basically kind of like a plant data catalog. And then there's CIMES, which is a weather, it kind of is all about weather data. And then there's WELO and MAWA, which is an ordinance and kind of just a process for kind of creating a water budget. It's basically a really helpful formula in the end. But I should mention, so this map on the left, I'm going to go over it again in a later slide, but this map on the left is produced by CIMES. I'm not sure how you're supposed to say these. This is how I have always said them, but no one's ever corrected me. So I think CIMES is cuter than like CIMIS or whatever. Could be the other alternative. So anyway, this was created by CIMES. And you can see this is basically a map of California divvied up into a bunch of different evapotranspiration zones, is what it says. You can think of evapotranspiration as kind of like irrigation zones for now. I'll get into it, but it's basically the different irrigation zones of the state. And clearly there's different all over because the different regions, are different, they're just different, period. And then there's this little chart there that's tiny. You can, okay, well, first of all, you can see it's color coded. So there's 18 different zones they've identified, and then they give you this value of evapotranspiration. I guess I'll just explain it now. That's probably easier. So evapotranspiration, or ETO, you can see in the top here, ETO, or is just the kind of what's it called? The not acronym. It's, what's the math term? Anyway, the ETO is that little icon for evapotranspiration. Same thing. I can't remember the word for that. But it's a value that's measured in inches, and it's basically like the evapotranspiration is the water lost through the soil and through the leaf of the plant. So it's like, it's basically a compound word. Evapo for evaporation, so like literally the water being lost through the soil, evaporation, and then transpiration is the water lost through the leaf of the plant. So you combine those two things, and that is all the water that's lost from the plant. And it's essentially kind of equivalent to irrigation demand. It's essentially like what you need to replace in the soil. That's the amount of water you need to replace in the soil so that the plant is not stressed. So the values here are for a reference crop. And it's just it's usually like a cool season, very well watered turf grass. So something that's like pretty water hungry, getting well watered and happy as a clam. And the idea is we get these values for this reference crop, and then you can adjust those values based off of what plants you actually are planting. If you're actually planting this turf crop, sorry, the turf grass, you would water exactly this much to keep it happy as a clam in whatever zone you're in. So, but I'll get a little more into the nitty gritty of that in the following slides. But yeah, essentially the evapotranspiration really depends on where you are. So if you're in Inyo County versus Humboldt County, it's going to be really different, right? Because these are different evapotranspiration rates in different zones. So it very much depends on where you are, and also what plant we're talking about. So of course, in this case, the reference crop is our thing, but you can have different values. Okay, I tried to explain all of that there. So now going back to the resources, WUCLS is this acronym for Water Use Classification of Landscape Species. A lot of these things are like really mouthfuls. But essentially this, again, is like a database of plants, over 3,000 species of plants that are used in California landscapes. And they're not all native plants. These are just commonly used in the California landscape. So there's everything, ornamentals, turf grasses, everything, vegetables, all of those are included in this database. And they basically categorize the plants or rate them relative to their watering needs. And it definitely depends on the location. They have their own regions, but that being said, it kind of looks like this top chart here, where they have the ratings is high, moderate, low, and very low. This is the abbreviation. And you can see this percentage of ETO is, this is that reference crop. So high would be 70 to 90%, so 0.7 or 0.9 if you were to put it in a formula, right? And that would be something like a turf grass. So if we were watering exactly that one reference crop that they were using, which is like, I don't know which cool season turf grass, then it would be 100% of ETO. But but of course, any turf grasses are going to be very high. They're going to be mostly, high percentage of ETO. And then moderate is in this range, obviously. And then the low would be things like lavender or rosemary, which are not California natives, but many of them come from Mediterranean climates and are considered drought tolerant or California friendly. So they're considered low. And so they're 10 or 30% of ETO. And then lastly, we have some California natives here that are considered very low. So they're less than 10%. So there's definitely some water savings with native plants, not that that's the point of this, but this is a very helpful database for finding which plants need what type of water. Sorry, how much water, what are their watering needs relative to ETO. Then there is back to CIMES, which is not just this chart, it's like a whole, again, another California Irrigation Management Information System. It sounds like this is one of those dated terms that feels like it came from like, I don't know, like the 1800s or something, but it's actually came from just the 80s. But it was basically developed by the Department of Water and Resources and UC Davis. It was designed for irrigators. And it was designed so that they could manage their water more efficiently. And that's a main reason why they use ETO, which is measured in inches, because precipitation rates, because irrigators, especially in agriculture, are using rainfall as irrigation, but they also are measuring in inches, like we talked about in the homework. So having the evapotranspiration in inches is very helpful for for irrigators. So again, they can know how much is actually being lost so that they can put that back down in the ground for their plants. So let's see, I think, yes, I did explain this thing. I'm going to zoom into, I think the next slide is zooming into the Los Angeles County, just so we can kind of have a little example. Here you can see, this is LA County. Oh, right. There's not just the graphs in this map, there's also live weather stations. So there's weather stations that give you real-time data, not just that kind of average chart that was shown on this slide. Oops. This is that chart that zoomed in. So this is just an average, but you can actually get real live data from CIMMYs. This is all free. This is like, CIMMYs is accessible, and it's in your handout, your outline, your student outline, if you can't find it. But anyway, what was I gonna say? Oh, yes, so you can see here in LA County, there's actually 7 different colors here, which means 7 different evapotranspiration zones. This one, I believe, is 17, this like grayish. 14 here. This is number 9. Here, this other color, 6, 4, 1, and 2 is also included, even though you can't see the color. So that's 7 different zones within LA County alone. So that means you would irrigate differently in all these zones. And if we were to just kind of, as an example, try Los Angeles, let's say like we're in Theodore Payne, which is like kind of Sun Valley. It's like kind of in this zone. It falls into 14. I zoomed in and like figured it out, but basically it's number 14. So if we were to use this chart, which is the zoomed in version of the chart that's on with the map, this chart gives us the monthly average of evapotranspiration by the different zones. So I was saying that Sun Valley or Theodore Payne is in zone 14. You see that here, and you can see along the top, it's all the different months. And then those values within the blue box are the monthly evapotranspiration rates for that zone. So that's, for example, January here, that's 1.5 inches that's lost per month that needs to be replaced into the ground for that reference crop. And that should make sense that the hottest month, here in July, it's like 8.5 inches or, a little more than 8.5 inches. So that makes about sense, but basically summer it's hotter, so they're losing more water through their soil and leaves, and in the winter, not so much. And that's why the values are lower. And if you add them all up in this last column, it's 57 inches. So that would be the annual average of evapotranspiration that you would lose from this, from the soil and the leaves of the reference crop. And that means that you need to put down at least 57 inches on average to keep that plant happy. Of course, again, you would adjust this for different plants, but we're talking about this value for this reference crop. So again, remember this number 57, this is the average, but we can look up in real time what's the data from the last 12 months to give us the annual for the last 12 months. And they basically have a map of the different weather stations. And you can see here 216, the numbers just are the weather stations that CIMMYs manages. And 216 is the one that's closest to the Sun Valley spot. So if we go to their website, you can see, you can just Google CIMMYs and it comes up, and then you just go to the data tab. And I go to that number 216, which was the one that was closest to Sun Valley, because I'm trying to just show the real-time data. Click on that, and I would like to do monthly report. You can see it gives you to hourly or daily. And then I run the report so that I can see what data comes up. You can see here on the left, it's the last 12 months. So we have values for 2020 because November is not yet over, and neither is December. So we have last year's data for November and December, and then you see all of 2021. And then this first column is ETO, and you can see also precipitation. So if you ever want to check the rainfall for an area close to the weather station in your area, you have a source here. But here you see the ETO. So these are the values that were calculated in the last 12 months. And if I wanted to get the annual average, sorry, not average, the annual actual evapotranspiration for this weather station, I would just add this value here and this one here. When you do it in like January 2021, it just has them all in one column, but since these are 2 different years, they separate them. But basically 5 plus 55 would be 60 inches, a little over 60 inches. So if you compare that with that value 57 that we got from the average, the 60 inches is more than the 57. So that means the last 12 months, we've had more evapotranspiration than on average. So that means you would have to water a bit more in the last 12 months than you would on average because of the evapotranspiration, which usually is tied to, temperatures and no rainfall and all those things. But that being said, let me see if I can get back to my slides. I think we're here. Yes, okay. So, sorry guys, I'm doing a little bit of, am I on? Yes, okay. Okay, so that's just so that you can either use that's a way to use the resource, or 2 different ways to use the evapotranspiration resource kind of via CIMES. Then there's WELO and MAWA, which, WELO is basically the statewide ordinance. And hold on, I have a note here. What did I want to say? Yeah, they already said that. Okay, so anyway, WELO is just a statewide ordinance that's basically trying to improve water efficiency in the landscape. So just trying to, that's basically the aim of the ordinance, and does it through several different kind of programs. But one of them is to increase water efficiency for standards for new and retrofitted landscapes, which MAWA is definitely part of, and I'll talk about. But also for existing landscapes, having certain water waste prevention tactics, and then and then MAWA is part of this ordinance. So with these new and retrofitted landscapes that are over like 2,500 square foot, you have to set a MAWA, which is a maximum applied water allowance. So it's just creating an upper limit for water use and trying to basically reduce the water use to the lowest practical amount. So and then lastly, WELO tries to encourage water agencies to use incentives to promote efficient water use, hence why LADWP offers a bunch of different rebates that are pertaining to irrigation equipment. So that's why we have Martha here with us today, and that's the WELO is kind of part of supporting those programs throughout the state. So MAWA, again, is just part of the WELO ordinance. And the reason I'm harping on MAWA is because there's a formula I want to get to that I think is really helpful for even outside of the MAWA context. But essentially, it should be clear, you're just trying to reduce the water use. This is an upper limit, and it's really just for these situations of new constructions or renovations that are larger than 2,500 square feet and like are kind of need some kind of permit or something like that. The formula, this is the simple one. They have one for like, I'll just stick with this actually. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But the reason I like this formula is I feel like it can be used in a lot of other situations, and you just have to tweak it a bit for your uses. But in terms of MAWA, when you're calculating the maximum allowed water, they want to know what that maximum allowed amount of water is in gallons. And remember, ETO is in inches, but the state doesn't care about how many inches of water you put down. They want to know how many gallons you're using, because that's how much that's what's on your water bill. That's how much they're delivering to you through a pipe. They're not measuring what falls from the sky in inches. They want to know how much water you use in your landscape, and that's measured in gallons on, in our system. So they want to know how many total maximum gallons are you going to use in a year. And so the formula is here. You can see this is going to give us gallons. ETO would be the evapotranspiration rate, again, for your region. So you pick that value for your region. And again, this is explaining what ETO is, which is for the growing of a cool season turf grass at optimal levels. So like a really well-watered cool season grass. which is part of the values in there. You don't have to figure it out. They give you the values. And that's measured in inches. And then you multiply that by 0.62, which is just a constant that helps you convert inches to gallons, essentially. So because again, we want to have gallons. This is all back to like math and units and stuff. And then you multiply this by the ET, what they call the ET adjustment factor. And this is going to adjust that inches or that value for the appropriate crops you have growing. So you aren't growing that well-watered, cool season turf grass. You're watering something else, something that's probably lower water using or lower in water use. So you adjust it. So again, when we go back to that WUCL's chart that had high percentage of ETO, that's where you could kind of tweak it here. And so if it was a very low watering thing, you might put it in the 0.1 to 0.3 range. And if it's like a vegetable garden, you might have it in the 0.8, 0.9 range. And then you multiply all of that by the square footage. So the area that you are actually planning on watering. So that would be, and that's in square feet. So in the case of MAWA, I want to just clarify that ETAF, they just give you two options, just 0.55 or 0.45 for residential or non-residential. That's just their catch-all. And I think it makes it easier than somebody having to go out and be like, okay, this plants this, that plants this. It's just an average for residential zones or for non-residential. And that's what they want you to use for this formula. But like I said, you can use this formula for other, like how much to water your own yard, or and you can change that adjustment factor. So here's just an example. This should be pretty clear, but you just plug it all in. So if I had a residential yard that I was retrofitting that was 3,000 square feet in Sun Valley, I would take that same value. Here's the same chart. I take this value here, or I can take that 60 inches that we got from the real time data. We're just going to use the average one. And I plug all those values in. So 57 inches times 0.62 times 0.55 because it's a residential project, and then times the 3,000 square feet, and we get the 58,000 gallons. So that's for MAWA. But also, if you were to be like, if you're calculating how much you want to water your garden, and maybe you want to utilize a rain tank, that can help you determine what size rain tank to buy. You can also figure out how much to water and keep it in inches still, and not have the conversion factor, or just figure out how many gallons you need to water and keep it the same way, but change the adjustment factor for your native plants. So make it lower, like 0.1 or 0.3, depending on if they're like, you have riparian plants or, like all desert natives. But I really like this formula, and I think it's really helpful, and comes into, it helps you determine like irrigation demand. So I like that one for that reason. And all these resources can be used that way. So
Claire, isn't there like two different landscape area calculations too with that? Like there's like a land, yeah.
There's one that's for like, I think it's called special
area.
And basically, I didn't include it, but it's the same formula, but then it has, it has like a plus another section. Mm-hmm. And that would be, I think, for, oh gosh.
I forgot what it was. I think it's
called like special planting areas or something kind of silly like that.
Yeah, maybe food gardens or something.
I believe it is something to do with like food gardens. Yeah. And it's, and it's also like play areas. Like if you have zones that are like landscaped, but also have a mix of lawn and mix of something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because it definitely does have a more complicated formula. Didn't want to scare anyone with math. So if anyone is really anti-math, like, I hope you got something from that. If you didn't, it's fine. You don't need to do this for your homework. The last one was probably the most homeworky, the most mathy in terms of homework. And then I'm just going to wrap up these last slides here for me, and then we'll do a break, and then we'll do Martha. So lastly, it's just kind of like the extras that you could charge for if you are offering services to clients. Some extras you can offer. A lot of these have to do with the rebates. So most of them you want to save the receipts, or write down any models for equipment that you're using, so that the customers can submit those receipts for their rebate. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, I'm just touching on these topics. Like I said, most of these are regarding the rebates. If you have any specific questions, wait till Martha talks about the rebates because she's really the expert. And I'm just kind of like, first touch again to bring that concept up again. So irrigation controller replacement. So anyone who's interested in getting one of those smart controllers, I believe the rebate right now is valued at like $200. So if somebody wanted to replace theirs, you could just offer the service of doing that all for them, charge for the equipment, the labor, the programming of the equipment, and potentially even like, create an ongoing customer by creating like a subscription service where you come quarterly or seasonally to adjust the watering schedule and make sure everything's functioning. But that is totally a possibility. So, timeout. I should mention this, as if I were a student, this is where I feel like I would zone out. But I just want to remind people to pay attention because this is your homework basically, is like you're going to be needing to kind of recite back to me what rebates are so that I know that you actually know about the rebate program. So that's just my little pay attention, I guess. Okay, so then there's also the sprinkler rebate work, which Martha will get into, but essentially it's a rebate for converting the high volume kind of traditional sprinkler heads to the new rotator heads, which are kind of water saving. And that's just changing out the heads literally of the sprinklers. So there is a minimum number. So I don't want to see on the homework like, okay, there's 5 sprinklers that I'm going to change. You have to at least convert 30 sprinkler heads to qualify for the rebate. But this is again something where you would just charge for the equipment and create an invoice that you installed all these things and just provide the model numbers, because you'll see on your student handout that the model numbers are needed for them to qualify for the rebate, and it has a whole giant list of multiple page list of all the different models that qualify. Oh, and this one does not qualify for the turf replacement program. So there is that replacement of your turf grass. That one, you can only change your irrigation system. Like if you have a sprinkler system and a turf garden and you are turf lawn, whatever, and you want to convert it to a native garden using that rebate, you can only convert it to drip irrigation. You can't convert it to sprinklers with rotator heads. This is only for someone who basically already has a lawn and maybe wants to keep the lawn or doesn't want to change out they just want to put water saving nozzles on, but they're not interested in, completely taking out their lawn. Okay, then there's rain garden grading, which I do this a lot. Basically, it's like basically creating a rainwater capturing feature is what I would call it. And essentially you're using either you're capturing rainfall or whatever irrigation water in the landscape by using basins or swales or berms and planting that out with native plants. And essentially you're like changing the topography of the landscape so that water collects and infiltrates on site, as opposed to running off your driveway or whatever and going to the storm drains and out to the ocean. So the idea with rain garden grading is creating topography and changing the topography so that water stays on site and doesn't go off. And this does kind of require a little bit of expertise, but I feel like once you have a couple of them under your belt, it kind of makes sense. But you can route rain gutters to these. And I find these are they really help with native plant establishment. I find that plants get established like in the first year almost with these rain garden systems, because they are, especially if you're routing like a gutter, like the roof gutters. If you route them to feed into these rain gardens, they actually that extra water that they receive is like exactly what they want, and it comes at the right time. It's with this, it's mimicking, it's basically amplifying whatever rain falls naturally on them because they're getting whatever's from the roof. And roof water, it's a lot more than you think. That's why those like 50-gallon drums sometimes or almost always overflow, because the stat is like, I believe it's 600, when 1 inch of rain. So if we had 1 inch of rainfall, you get 600 gallons of water off of 1,000 square feet. That's just like back of the napkin math. It's not exact, but that's a lot of water. So 600 gallons, that's way more than your 50-gallon drum. And most of our, gutters usually are about like 700 square feet it's feeding into. So it can be a lot of water that's really helpful for native plants to get established, is all I'm saying. And the reason I'm harping on this so much is because I do this a lot and I really love this. And I think it's really important for capturing water in the landscape, but also it is required for the turf replacement program. So they need some kind of water capturing feature, which they have on their website, like the different names they have for them, but it's usually like a basin, a swale, a berm, or even a rain garden, they call it rain garden. Everybody kind of uses terms a little bit differently, but on the website, it says exactly what they mean by the terms. And they don't have to be like this one, which is like a dry riverbed. You can do the whole thing mulch. It doesn't have, because rocks can be very costly. Obviously this is very beautiful, but you can mulch the whole thing. And just the fact that you've changed the topography is enough. And there is a little bit of a planting, what's it called? Like you want to be specific about your planting with any kind of topographical changes, because it goes back to kind of the factors for irrigation. The lowest part of the basin, which is, you can see this part that's filled with water, is going to be the moistest part, and also what is subject to kind of ephemeral flooding, because obviously you can see here, so it gets inundated and then of course it infiltrates. But the plants you plant in here, this one has none, but if you were to plant plants in here, you want to make sure they're plants that can handle, like, the occasional flood. So things like juncus, or a lot of our riparian species, or I had another, like yarrow even does well. It can handle being like inundated and then back to dry. So you can plant this out. And then the top deck here, this is the high point of the landscape. You would want something that wants the good drainage. It doesn't want to be too close. Like this is where you start to put the things that don't want their feet wet and want good drainage. And then along the middle zone here, kind of the medium ground, you can plant, something that's adaptable to either situation, or that, doesn't mind being a little bit wetter. So there is a little bit of placement that you want to get right. I mean, of course, you'll learn over time, but that's definitely a service you can offer. And I'm harping on it because of the rebate program, people want this service because they want to get the rebate, which is like $2 or $3 a square foot. But a lot of people don't want to do the backbreaking labor of moving that soil around. So providing this is really helpful. And then lastly, the WILO and MAWA calculations, which I kind of went over the formula already, but essentially, again, this is for these larger landscapes over 2,500 square feet, and ones that, have some kind of like permit or something involved. So you could actually just offer that to your client, offer to make that calculation, or include it if you're the designer, maybe include it in the design. It, totally depends. But like I said, that MAWA calculation, I think, can be, that MAWA formula that I gave can be really useful for calculating how much irrigation someone might need. So I think you could use this, whether or not you use it in the context of MAWA, you can use these calculations to kind of customize someone's design, or kind of irrigation audit, something like that. You could really show them how much water they would need at, in summertime for this type of garden, or versus the one they have, something like that. So I think this could be a service that you offer, or like some kind of report. It makes more sense in kind of a water auditing situation. But either way, so that's the last of me, at least for this lecture. Your homework I'll put up here, but we're going to take the break shortly, which is just determining what LEDWP rebates a certain client would qualify for. So based off of what Martha says in the class, or in her lecture, telling me what rebates they qualify for, how much they would get, how much square footage are they converting, or that sort of thing. How many sprinkler heads are they converting? Just give me an example client and how they could take advantage of any or all of the rebates that are that they qualify for. And if you don't have a client, just use your backyard, your neighbor, your parents, whatever. You can use some yard that you could just apply to kind of do the thought experiment part. So let's come back at, let's see, 6:15. That'll be 5 or 6 minutes. And then Martha will talk to us about the rebates. And if you guys have any questions, obviously I'm here, but we'll talk about rebates at 6:15.
Sounds good.
Martha, are you here?
I am.
Oh, good.
Hi,
I
Claire.
believe I have your updated what's it called, PowerPoint, but I don't know if you wanted to try to do it. Is it easier for you to just share it?
I can, like that, I can just move to the next slide instead of
Yeah,
having to say next.
yeah. I think Lydia, is that possible that we could just put her as a host? I guess I could maybe do that. Oh, Lydia might be on break. But
I can do it. I can put her as a host.
oh, perfect. Yeah, Makita, you're here. That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that makes. I'll stop my share then, and
Martha, hold on for just a second. Let me find her. Martha, okay. All right, Martha, you are now a co-host.
Thank you. I will see what I can do if I can find where you're at.
yeah, if not, I have it on my too, but just in case, if it does seem like it's easier.
All right. Can you guys see that?
It's coming up. There it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so 6:15. So yeah, gonna hand this over to Martha. She's the water conservation specialist with LEDWP, and she's gonna talk about all the rebates. And again, it's on your homework. So and also not only is it on your homework, but she's the resource. So ask all your questions. I feel like every time you come, I ask the same questions just to remind me, but she's definitely the expert on this. So if you have any questions regarding any of the rebates or any of the issues you've had with them, this is the time to ask them. But yeah, here's Martha Rodriguez.
Thank you, Claire. Good evening, everyone. As Claire mentioned, my name is Martha Rodriguez. I'm a water conservation specialist with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And I'm going to go over the outdoor landscape rebates that you should definitely take advantage of. The email to contact my group, we are a small group, is waterconservation@ladwp.com. Don't be afraid to email us. We will get back to you pretty quickly and answer any of your questions. We want to help you. So please make sure you take a picture of that or write it down. It'll be available at the end as well. Okay, so for the purposes of rebates, I'm going to define what is residential or commercial. For residential, we define it as single family dwelling or 1 to 4 multi-family dwelling units. So if you have a property that you're working on and it's a duplex, you would apply under residential. And if you have a commercial property, which is commercial, industrial, institutional, or 5 or more multi-family dwelling units, you would apply under commercial. And there's a difference in the rebates amount and the procedure in applying. So that's why I want to clarify that. Residential, here are some of the rebates that I will briefly go through: the weather-based irrigation controller, soil moisture sensor, hose bib irrigation controller, flow monitoring leak detection device, rotating nozzles, rain barrel or cistern, and the turf replacement program. Weather-based irrigation controller, as Claire was talking about, the rebates for residential are up to $200, anything less than an acre. Anything over an acre is $35 per station. It says qualifying, so there is a list of qualifying models, so you need to make sure that before you purchase any of the devices that are menu-based, that you check the qualifying list and make sure that the model is on there so that you can take advantage or your customer can take advantage of that rebate. For soil moisture sensors, pretty much the same thing as a weather-based irrigation controller. It does need to include a sensor, calibrator, and a controller. Up to $200 less than an acre, $35 per station if greater than an acre. Hose bib irrigation controller, it connects directly to your faucet and hose, up to $35 for a qualifying model. The bottom one here, it's a flow monitoring leak detection device, and this is a new rebate for us. You need to have reliable Wi-Fi at the installation location, smart device such as a smartphone or tablet. This device, the one that we rebate on, can only be installed on the customer property. There is other devices that are installed on the water meters, and at this time we are not allowing those as part of the rebate program, only the ones that are installed on the customer property. And the rebate amount is up to $150. Rotating nozzles, qualifying nozzles, minimum of 30 nozzles to qualify for the rebate, up to $6 per nozzle. Rain barrel or cistern, rain barrel minimum 50 gallons, up to 2 rain barrels at 50 per barrel. Or, and there's an or here because these cannot be combined. Either you get a rebate for a rain barrel or a cistern. The cistern rebate varies in rebate amount based on the size. 200 to 500 gallons is $300. Anything over 1,000 gallons is up to $500, limit 1. So once again, rain barrel or cistern.
I'm sorry, Martha, to interrupt. I can't remember. Do you want questions peppered within or wait till the end? We have one in the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, let me look. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You know, they can talk.
I can ask that question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm part of a school garden project, and We had initially gone direct to DWP for the removing of the grass and qualifying for that rebate. And I'm
Okay.
just wondering if it's the same process in terms of just the organization on the school campus can go directly to DWP and not through the district.
Okay, so you're saying, so would it be like part of LAUSD?
Yeah,
See, the thing is, the rebate goes to whosever name is on the water bill. So if it's
Oh, I
going
see.
to be LAUSD, then you would definitely have to go through the district to let them know what's going on.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Okay, no problem. So let me tell you here, on these residential rebates, if you guys are contractors, and Claire touched on this a little bit, if you're a contractor, you want to be, let's say the irrigation controller, it says up to $200. You want to take advantage for your customer, you want to take advantage of the full rebate. So you as a contractor might buy a controller for, let's say, I don't know, $75. You're a contractor, you're allowed to make your receipt for the customer. Like I mentioned, whoever is going to get paid on the rebate is the person who's on the water bill. So you unfortunately would not be able to get paid as a contractor for the rebate directly to you, but the customer can apply. So if your invoice says that the controller was purchased for $200, that is the amount that you can charge the customer, even though the controller itself might have cost you less because you are a contractor, you know where to buy these. So I would definitely say take advantage of that. And whatever the model number is, make sure the model number is on there and the amount that that you're selling this to the customer. Okay, you can also list labor and all that stuff on there. It's really going to be the model number and the actual controller that is going to get rebated on. So make sure that, like I said, you take advantage of the full amount so the customer can take advantage as well. All right, for commercial. So I skipped turf replacement program because I'm going to go over it at the end. They're very similar for as far as residential and commercial. So I just put it all together. So for commercial landscaping, which is once again institutional, commercial, industrial, and anything over 5 units of multifamily, these are the rebates that you can apply for. Weather-based irrigation controller, soil moisture sensor, rotating nozzles, large rotary nozzle retrofit, in-stem flow regulator, and the turf replacement program. So here is the weather-based irrigation controller or central computer irrigation controller, which would be more for large landscape, maybe a golf course or a park. They would have more of a central controller system. These are 50 per station. So it doesn't matter how, the controller, as long as it's a qualifying model. What matters is the amount of stations, and that's how you will get paid for it, per station. Soil moisture sensor is also per station. Once again, must include sensor, calibrator, and controller, up to 50 per station. Rotating nozzles, minimum of 30 nozzles to qualify for rebate. Rebate is up to $6 per nozzle. Large rotary nozzle retrofit. So you're replacing the standard plastic nozzle with durable metal nozzles that are, of course, efficient. And these are up to $13 per head, 8 head minimum. In-stem flow regulators. The in-stem flow regulators control water in irrigation systems at the sprinkler head, up to $2 per device, 20 device minimum, no maximum. So the commercial rebates are a little different in the way that you have to actually reserve the funds first. Okay, so residential, the rebates don't tend to have high amounts as far as, let's say a controller is no more than $200. But if you have a large landscape, you might have many stations where it can be thousands of dollars. So we need you to reserve those funds first for commercial. Once you get your reservation, you have reserved those funds, then you can go ahead, make the purchase, do the installation, and then go back online within 60 days to upload all the documentation and finish the application. So right there you have SoCalWatersmart.com. It is a third-party group that handles our rebates. We do touch these rebates. We do have to verify a lot of information. So eventually it will come to my desk. but SoCal WaterSmart is where you will go to get all the lists of the qualifying models to estimate your rebates. If you're not working in an LADWP territory, go to SoCal WaterSmart, estimate your rebate for the area that you're working for. Most water agencies right now, especially because of the drought, have rebates or are increasing their amounts. So definitely, that's a good website to go to. All right, residential turf removal program. Is there any? Okay. So on the left-hand side, you have a residential property with grass, and on the right-hand side, you have a transformed landscape. So in partnership with MWD, which is our Metropolitan Water District, which is our wholesaler of water, we pay total $3 per square foot of grass that is removed and converted to drought-tolerant landscape. Pre-approval is required prior to removing grass. So you need to get pre-approved, and then you can go ahead and remove your grass. So they are allowing yellowish, deadish grass now because people have cut back on their watering. So that is acceptable. What is not acceptable is dirt. You can't remove dirt or send pictures of dirt and apply for a rebate. Sorry. So pre-approval is required. Maximum for residential is 5,000 square feet. All right, here is commercial property. I believe this is a Kaiser. On the left-hand side, it was all grass. Then it was transformed to a drought-tolerant landscaping, which pretty much is a lot of mulch and plants, and then some type of rain capture feature. I think at this time they weren't requiring a rain capture feature, but it is something that is required now. Once again, for commercial, pre-approval is required, $3 per square foot, up to 50,000 square feet, and $1 per square foot, anything over 50,000 square feet, up to 7 acres maximum. All right, terms and conditions. All the turf must be removed in project area and covered with a weed barrier material, preferably organic, cardboard, paper, etc. All overhead irrigation must be capped, removed, or converted to drip irrigation. As Claire mentioned, no overhead irrigation is allowed. So as far as the rebate for the nozzles, that would not be eligible here. So all turf must be removed. All overhead irrigation must be removed. Not necessarily fully removed, just capped or converted to drip. Additional hand watering may be needed during plant establishment. All weed barrier material and exposed soil must be covered with at least 3 inches of mulch. No exposed soil. All must be covered with mulch. The projects must include one of the following rain capture techniques: rain garden, rain barrel, cistern, infiltration trench, vegetative swale, berm, dry riverbed, grade, retention pond. Like Claire mentioned, there's a lot of other names. They're all very similar. Just, there is videos, and I will show you where those videos are, where you can see the difference if you wanted to. If not, you can, I'm sure, do Google search and find the sources. If not, Claire is a good one on that one. Okay, this one is really important. Projects are allowed a maximum of 25% of the project area to be covered with non-vegetated materials such as pavers, gravel, decomposed granite, decorative rocks, sand, etc. If you've been working in the LA area about 5 or 6 years ago, when there was a drought again, we've always, we've had this program for a while, but at that time, your projects were allowed to be all gravel, all pretty much permeable hardscape. So you saw a lot of those projects and a lot of companies just, coming out of nowhere, just doing these projects. They weren't landscapers. They were just throwing pretty much gravel and plants. So that is no longer allowed. Only 25% of the project area is allowed to have some type of hardscape, permeable hardscape. So like if you do a dry riverbed, that rock that you use in there would be the 25% of your area, okay? So just make sure you understand that and your customer understands that. Okay. Front yard and backyard projects must include 3 plants per every 100 square feet. We recommend native and drought tolerant and California friendly plants. Okay, so the parkway terms and conditions. The parkway is the area between the street and the back of the curb and the sidewalk that is typically planted or landscaped. So technically, this area is owned by the city of Los Angeles. And for the rebate to be paid for this area, the only thing that is allowed is highlighted, and it's plants and mulch only. Once again, plants and mulch only. Nothing else. The plants must be drought tolerant or native to California, must cover 80% plant coverage at full maturity. So we definitely recommend low growing ground cover type plants. And plants must be lower than 36 inches in height at full maturity. I mean, you think about it, a lot of people park right there, so they can't get out of their vehicle. They're going to probably mess up your landscape. So you don't want them to do that. Leave them some space with mulch and then put your plants. Just have low growing plants. So all commercial properties must obtain a permit from street services. Like I mentioned, this area is part of the city and they do have strict guidelines on it. Visit ladwp.com/PW for full parkway guidelines.
Martha,
Yes.
what about DG?
So what is not allowed in the parkway? Right here at the bottom.
Oh.
So what is allowed only is plants and mulch. That's it. Plants and mulch. No turf or turf-looking grasses. No plants with rigid spines or thorns. Poisonous, noxious, invasive. No vegetable or fruit gardens. And no cement, sand, decomposed granite, bark, pavers, cobblestones, synthetic or artificial turf. I'm not saying you don't see it out there, because we do. And people will just put rock in their parkway and they want to apply for the rebate. Unfortunately, we can't accept it. We will deny it. We will first give you the ability and option of correcting the problem. So we'll give you an extra couple weeks to remove all the gravel or remove the DG and just cover it with mulch and plants. But I mean, hopefully people know this ahead of time, that they won't have to deal with it at the end. But pretty much plants and mulch only for the parkway. All right. So this is how you apply for the turf removal program. Okay. Pre-approval, like I said, is required before starting your project. You're going to need a minimum of 5 pictures of the project area showing the front of the house and front yard and all project areas. So you're going to need one pretty much from the street. So be careful. If you're doing this for a customer, I would say it would be easier for you to walk them through all the steps. Possibly you submit all the information for them if that's needed. But at least if nothing else, you know what you're gonna need to do before in order for them to get the rebate. First full page of the DWP water bill, and then a landscape plan, a drawing. It doesn't have to be anything, professional. It can literally be a graph paper and, with the rectangle showing the house, the garage, the front yard, backyard, your parkway. You can put little X's as where the plants are going to be. They need to have measurements as well, so make sure you get the measurements. Then you're going to go to SoCalWaterSmart.com to apply. Once again, SoCal WaterSmart is where you're going to find the list for all the models of all the rebates for the devices, and where you're going to apply for the devices as well as the turf program as well. So you will go to either residential or commercial, and then you will submit your application. You'll click there. You're going to create a user ID and password, and you're going to sign it up. Basic application information, name, address, email, phone number, account number, and then you're going to include project information, property type, the address, lot size, current irrigation type, square footage of all of the areas that will be converted, front yard, backyard, parkway. And then you're going to select from, I think there's a drop-down menu, you're going to select the rain capture technique that you will be using in the project. Once you have submitted all of that online, uploaded, save, you make sure you read the terms and conditions. There is videos here offered by MWD where they will show you the different types of rain capture techniques. You will e-sign the application by typing your name, and then you will save and submit, and it goes off to SoCal WaterSmart. So When you hit save and submit, you will automatically get a notification indicating that your application has been submitted. You are not pre-approved yet, okay? This takes about 1 to 2 weeks, so don't remove the grass yet. Just wait. Maybe start planning more or make your drawing a little better. I don't know, talk to your customer, but please don't remove the grass yet. So on the left bottom side is what a pre-approval will look like, okay? When you get the pre-approval, you will have 180 days to complete the project, which is 6 months. I recommend you read the terms and conditions one more time. If you have any questions regarding the terms and conditions or during the whole process, email my group, waterconservation@ladwp.com. We will answer you. We are currently telecommuting, so the email is the easiest, but if you want to leave us your phone number and we'll call you back, you can do that. There's our phone number. And when you have everything ready, then go for it and get started. When you are finished, so before the 180 days are up, you're going to go back to SoCal WaterSmart. You will sign in and update your application information in case anything changed. You can't increase your square footage, but you can always decrease. Maybe at this point, you can only do the front yard. Maybe later you can do the rest. But that's when you will update your information. You will upload the newest page of your DWP bill, minimum of 5 new pictures of the completed project. You must include a picture of your rain capture feature, and then you'll save and submit again. If the project meets all the terms and conditions, you will be notified in 2 to 4 weeks that your rebate is approved. It will still take 6 to 8 weeks for approval to receive that rebate check. Here is the contact information for my group. Once again, waterconservation@ladwp.com, our hotline as well. Leave a clear message and a callback number if you want to. If you have any trouble when you are applying on the website to SoCalWaterSmart.com, there is their hotline. I can't help you upload any information or anything like that. So if you have any trouble or anything, call them directly. Okay. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to look at the chat here. All right, Lydia had asked that already. But if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat or just, speak it out.
Quick question. You said
Yes.
that the turf removal, that one needs a pre-approval. The other rebates, say, the rainwater collection and all that, and all the other rebates, do they still need pre-approval or just submit with proof of whatever change was done?
So for all the menu-based rebates, which is for residential would be like the controller, the rotating nozzles, anything like that. For residential, less than 4
Right.
units does not require a reservation.
Pre-approve.
Correct, or pre-approval. Does not
Okay.
require pre-approval.
Okay.
Anything commercial would technically, the reservation is like a pre-approval. It's making sure those funds are secured for you. So that
Okay.
would be the only time that you need that.
Okay, for the turf removal.
Correct.
The turf.
But
Okay.
But for the devices, for commercial, you need a reservation first.
Okay, so it still need to go through that reservation.
Correct.
Okay. And which I guess kind of answers my next question. I was going to say, we just had one of our clients was doing their landscape and they decided to do rain barrels all
Okay.
over the property. But they already did. They already purchased them. They already have them in place. We landscaped around them so that you can't really see them, but they're there. They can't submit anymore. They didn't do a reservation before they went ahead and did all that, not knowing that there was a rebate on that.
Okay, so this is a commercial property?
No, residential.
Okay, so residential, remember, they can make the purchase installation first for the devices.
Okay.
And then they apply, I think it's within 90 days.
Okay.
It might actually be a year now. So they could still apply.
Okay, then I guess I misunderstood. When you said the reservation, that's just for the turf.
No,
Removal.
so let me go back a little bit. So
Yes.
for the devices, we're
Right.
talking about controllers, cisterns,
Mhm.
all that stuff. Residential, you can purchase, install, and then apply.
Gotcha.
Okay. I believe they have extended it to a year, but for sure it used to be 90 days of from the date of the receipt. Okay?
Okay, all right,
Most of the times, if it's within a year, we could get some type of exception. So, but I would still say go through SoCal WaterSmart, have them apply, have them upload their information, their bill, and their receipt. And then they will get notified by SoCal WaterSmart if any additional information is needed, or if they don't qualify because it's exceeded the whatever
the
date.
time,
Yeah, but like I said, if it hasn't been more than a year, it shouldn't be a problem. We'll somehow make an exception for that.
all right, well, thank you.
No problem. Anybody else?
No other questions for Martha, guys? If no other questions, that's it for my part of the lecture. So we would end early, but definitely make sure you get Martha's information. She had that on that last slide up for a while, so you probably could have gotten it. But that's all we have for lecture today. So we'll wrap up early if there's no more questions. And then class on Friday will be integrated pest management and weeding. So that will be Friday's class. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If there's no other questions for Martha, let's call it.
All right, you guys can always email if you have questions later on that you forgot to or are just too shy. Please feel free to email us and we'll get back to you. Usually, like I said, within 24 hours, we should, usually within a couple of hours, but I'll guarantee usually within 24 hours during the week. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you so much,
you.
Martha,
Thank you,
for
guys.
coming.
Thank
And see
Thank
you
you.
guys all on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Bye.
Good night.